You know how sometimes you feel like to really understand the big issues in the world, you'd have to spend your whole life reading?
Yeah.
It's like, oh my gosh, how can I even begin to grasp all of this stuff?
Yeah, it's super overwhelming.
Yeah. What if instead of that, there was a way to get like those key insights in a much more focused way?
Welcome to the deep dive.
What if, right? Today we're diving into exactly that, efficient understanding.
Ooh, I like that.
We're calling it
Hit me with it.
mindful moments.
Oh, okay.
Not just like, those fleeting thoughts you have, but like these concentrated bursts of clarity on these complex subjects.
Okay, so really laser focused. Yeah?
Exactly. The
Okay.
goal is to like extract powerful knowledge without being totally overloaded with information.
I love it.
Right.
Okay, so to help us with this exploration today, we're going to be looking at excerpts from Noam Chomsky's How the World Works.
Yes.
Now,
Great book.
Chomsky, he can be pretty critical of a lot of things.
Oh, yeah, for sure. But within his work, there are also some really interesting ideas about how positive change can happen.
Absolutely.
So our mission today is to bring those to light.
Exactly. We want to really sift through this material and find those key positive theories and examples
Okay.
to give you like a clear and insightful understanding of where the possibilities for a better world lie according to Chomsky's perspective.
I'm ready. Let's do it.
Awesome.
Okay, so one thing that really jumps out at me right away from the text is that even those like super powerful structures in society
Yeah.
can be influenced by pressure from ordinary people.
Hmm.
And Chomsky uses the Vietnam War as a really powerful example.
Yeah, this is a great example. It's not just that there were protests, right? It's that they were sustained and like strategically focused.
Right.
Like think about the draft resistance and all of the widespread political mobilization happening at the same time.
Right.
That created this kind of domestic instability that the U.S. government just couldn't ignore. And it really highlights how persistent public dissent can become like a huge cost for those in power.
Okay.
It forces them to reconsider their policies.
So it's not just about like protest matters. It's about a certain kind of protest. Like it has to be organized and sustained.
Exactly. It has to have that kind of pressure behind it to really shift the balance for those in power.
Yeah, it's interesting.
And that actually leads us to another point that Chomsky brings up in the text, which is about the potential for elections to matter.
Okay.
Now, he's not saying that elections are like this magical solution on their own,
Right.
but he does suggest that when citizens organize around specific issues and consistently hold their elected officials accountable, then the process can become a really genuine way to make change.
So it's about that engagement beyond just voting, right?
Totally.
It's like making sure that the people who are supposed to be representing us are actually representing our interests and not just their own agendas or the agendas of special interest groups.
Exactly. It's about creating that feedback loop where public pressure actually shakes political action.
I like that. Okay, so there's also this phrase in the text that I wanted to touch on, which is signs of progress.
Yeah.
So Chomsky doesn't really list out what those signs are specifically,
Right.
but it does suggest that he acknowledges that, not everything is negative.
Right.
And that there are places where things are moving in a positive direction.
Yeah, it makes you wonder what he considers to be progress.
Totally.
It's not explicit, but it does suggest that he sees some positive developments, maybe in areas like public awareness or the growth of certain social movements.
Yeah. Okay, interesting. So let's shift gears a little bit and talk about one of the core philosophical ideas that Chomsky brings up in the text, which is Aristotle's concept of the common good.
Yes. This is a fascinating concept. What's really insightful here is how Aristotle connects the common good with both equality and freedom.
Okay.
So it wasn't just about everyone having like a basic level of well-being.
Right.
It was about creating a society where people could actually participate and thrive, which requires a certain degree of both equitable opportunity and individual liberty.
So it's not just about like basic needs being met, but also about having the ability and the freedom to actually be an active member of your community.
Exactly. And that actually connects to another really important idea that Chomsky highlights,
Okay.
which is that creating a more humane world isn't about trying to change some like inherent negative human nature.
Right.
It's about changing the circumstances that people are operating within.
So like instead of trying to change who we are as humans, it's about changing the systems and structures around us to encourage those positive behaviors.
Exactly. Think of it like gardening. You don't try to change the nature of the seed itself.
Right.
You create the right conditions for the flowers you want to grow.
I like that analogy.
Yeah.
That's a good one. Okay, so along those lines of societal structures, The text also talks about how rights have been expanded over time through popular struggle.
Absolutely. Things like freedom of speech and women's suffrage, those weren't just given to people. They were won through sustained movements and a lot of effort.
Yeah, and it wasn't always peaceful either.
Exactly. These expansions of rights were often the result of challenging and sometimes even violent struggles.
Yeah.
The victories of workers' rights in the 1930s are a really powerful example of that.
Right. It really highlights that even when it feels like individual participation might not make a difference, or even that it could be dangerous, the collective impact of many people acting together can actually lead to some really huge changes in society.
Yeah, and the text uses this really poignant example of a young Black student during the civil rights era who had to choose between pursuing their own personal advancement or joining SNCC.
Yeah, that's a powerful example of the sacrifices that people often have to make for collective progress.
Totally. While someone might have to face immediate risks or give up certain opportunities by participating in a movement, those actions can ultimately lead to huge benefits for their entire community and for generations to come.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Okay, so let's move on to another section of the text that talks about alternative models of societal organization,
Okay.
specifically industrial democracy and worker-owned enterprises like Mondragon.
Yeah, what's so interesting about Mondragon is that it flips the traditional corporate hierarchy on its head.
Okay.
Instead of this top-down structure, the workers themselves have ownership and, at least in theory, control.
Interesting.
Which is a really stark contrast to what Chomsky describes as the often totalitarian nature of conventional corporations.
Right, so it's like a real-world example that shows us that the traditional hierarchical model isn't the only way to do things.
Exactly.
There are viable alternatives that actually empower the people who are doing the work.
Absolutely. And then Chomsky also highlights the potential of local self-governing initiatives.
Okay.
He gives the example of village development programs in West Bengal,
Okay.
which shows how when communities are empowered to make their own decisions, they can actually be incredibly effective at addressing their own needs.
So these aren't massive top-down programs, but they're like grassroots efforts where people are taking ownership and driving positive change within their own communities.
Exactly. And what's really remarkable is how effective that can be.
Right. So it's not always about waiting for solutions to come from some distant authority.
Yeah, sometimes the best solutions come from the people who are closest to the problems.
Right. There's also this theme in the text about people acting with basic decency and solidarity,
Yes.
even across those typical political divides. And he mentions Witness for Peace as an example of that.
Yes, Witness for Peace is such a great example because it kind of defies those easy political labels.
Right.
It's about individuals who are driven by their ethics and by humanitarian principles.
Yeah.
And they act in solidarity with others regardless of whether they're on the left or the right of the political spectrum.
So it's really about finding that common ground based on shared human values.
Exactly. It's a reminder that sometimes people just do the right thing because it's the right thing to do.
Right. And those acts of solidarity can have a real impact.
Absolutely. Okay, and then something else that Chomsky talks about is how our understanding of history and of societal structures is actually evolving over time.
Okay.
He uses the example of how we understand Columbus's arrival in the New World.
Oh, yeah.
It's not seen as just this purely heroic discovery anymore,
Right.
but as a complex event that had really profound and often devastating consequences for indigenous populations.
Yeah.
And that shift in understanding, that's a form of progress in itself.
Totally.
It shows a willingness to look at our history critically and move beyond those simplistic celebratory narratives.
Right. And that's so important for us to be able to understand the present.
Absolutely. You can't understand where you are if you don't understand where you came from.
Right? You know, all this talk about distilling these key insights so efficiently reminds me of that AI audiobook analysis YouTube channel, Mindful Moments.
Oh, yeah.
They're doing some really cool work trying to take these complex ideas and make them accessible to a wider audience.
Yeah, I've seen their stuff. It's great for people who want to get to the heart of the matter without having to wade through tons of information.
Exactly. I think our listeners would really appreciate it. Okay, so to continue with the theme of potential for change, Chomsky also points to the existence of alternative political options and movements that are working within the system.
Yeah.
He mentions groups like the Green Party, the Labor Party, and the New Party.
Right. And while they may not be the dominant forces in U.S. politics right now,
Right.
their presence and their activity shows that there's a real desire for different approaches.
Yeah.
And a possibility for the political landscape to change over time.
So they're kind of like those avenues for people who are dissatisfied with the status quo to organize and advocate for something different.
Exactly. It suggests that there is some dynamism within the system, even if change can be slow.
Okay, so then Chomsky even goes a step further and talks about a vision for global change.
Yeah.
He references the South Commission's idea of a new world order. But this is different from the typical U.S.-centric idea of a new world order, right?
Totally. The South Commission's vision really emphasizes the aspirations of developing nations.
Okay.
They want a more equitable and just global system that's not just dominated by the interests of powerful Western countries.
Right. So it's like there are these different perspectives on what a better world would look like.
Exactly. And then one of the most important takeaways from all of this is that the most effective solutions to these complex problems we're facing, they don't usually come from these big top-down schemes.
Right.
They come from people working on these issues at a local grassroots level.
So it's about like taking initiative and finding those practical solutions within your own community.
Exactly. And Chomsky gives us some concrete examples.
Okay.
Community initiatives in towns in Massachusetts.
Okay.
Self-governing villages in India. The Jesuit Center in Colombia.
Wow.
These are all examples of people just rolling up their sleeves and making things happen.
I like it.
Yeah.
Okay, so one last idea from the text that I want to touch on is this concept of intellectual liberation.
Oh, yeah.
And Chomsky argues that this is something that you achieve through engaging with others and participating in organizations.
Yeah, this is a really crucial point. He's saying that truly understanding and critically analyzing the world around us, it's not just an individual pursuit.
Right.
It's something that you develop through collective engagement, through sharing ideas and collaborating with others.
Right. So it's not just about learning in isolation. It's about being an active part of those conversations and movements that are working towards change.
Exactly.
Okay, so Chomsky concludes on this note that even though there are all these huge challenges that we've been talking about, there are also real opportunities for positive change.
Absolutely. He's not being naively optimistic,
Right.
but he's recognizing that the possibilities for a better future are there.
Okay.
And that we can actually make that future a reality through informed action, collective organizing, and a real commitment to creating positive change.
I love that. So to wrap up this deep dive, the key takeaway for you is that you don't have to spend your whole life doing research to understand how the world works.
Right.
And you don't have to feel powerless to create positive change.
Exactly. By focusing our analysis on insightful material like Chomsky's work, and by recognizing the power of collective action, we can all contribute to a more informed and hopefully a better world.
I love it.
Make sure to subscribe and share this episode with your friends. We're constantly exploring new and challenging ideas, things that make you question what you think you know.
And we've included a purchase link for the book in the show notes, just for you. Keep those minds sharp and never stop questioning. Until next time. And finally, we encourage you to take some time to really think critically about everything we discussed today and consider what it means for your own understanding of the world and your place in it.
Well said.
Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.
Yeah, thanks everyone.